I'm excited to be here with Antonella. And how do you say your last name?
It's Cvrtak. So it's actually, if you don't think about it and just read it, it's easy. But as soon as you start thinking about it, your tongue just breaks down.
Yeah, because it's let's see, it's Cvrtak or
CVR.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so I'm here with Antonella Cvrtak. Is that kind of right? Okay, good.
Yeah.
She is the Accelerator Manager, the leader of women's investment readiness accelerator called GrowF out of Vienna, Austria. It's a 3-month online accelerator program helping female founders get funded. So would you like to add anything about that, Antonella, about what you do?
No, wonderful. So also from my side, hi. I've joined Female Founders about 2 years ago. I think that's also very interesting because I've been part of so many different projects, always focusing on female founders and figuring out a great way how we can support them. And my main focus is also investment readiness. And I took over the program about 2 months ago. And yeah, we are currently in batch 8. So we already helped about 70 startups in getting investment ready and supporting them through out the way along.
So cool. Yeah. And I love working with you guys. I've done some workshops for Lead F, and then I'm going to do a workshop with Grow F next year. So that's exciting. Yeah. So let's get into this conversation, because I'm really interested to talk to you, because while I have expertise on communication skills and confident and persuasive speaking, I am not on that investment side of things. I know kind of what happens, but I'm not in the room, so to speak, when people are pitching and things like that. So I'm really curious to hear your thoughts and ideas about how people can be more persuasive, more confident when they're doing that. And then, of course, I can share some tips and tricks as well. So the first question I have for you is very simply, why is it important to be confident when you are pitching, when you're trying to get investment as a female founder?
So I think in general, this is something that we definitely agree on, is communication skills are so essential for basically everything, right? And understanding the information and getting it, like also translating the information like on point is so relevant. And when you look at the startup ecosystem, it's just like a very, very fast-paced environment and very busy here as well. So as a startup founder, you often find yourself in a very high-pressure situation or a difficult situation, and you need to lead those difficult conversations. And that's why communication skills, and especially being confident and persuasive, are so, so crucial. And it's kind of happening all the time. It can be with your co-founder, with your employees, then obviously also with your investors and customer and clients here as well. So managing this conversation is not only something that is helping you, but it's also kind of expected from a founder. So kind of looking at the central or the main point here, it's just like expected from founders to be confident, to talk about the startup, to talk about themselves as founders. And at the same time, founders need to persuade so many people, basically everyone around them, what they are and what they're doing is crucial and relevant, and people should be interested in. So it's just like kind of part of your daily business is also being confident and speaking to people and persuading people on that matter.
And where do you see, in your experience with all these founders, where do you see them struggling the most with being confident and being persuasive?
That's a very good question. I think, especially when it comes to talking to investors, I think most founders are very, very confident in speaking about their startups and about themselves. It's actually something that I sometimes joke around, that in interviews, I need to stop founders from talking, because they're just like so into the idea. They're so much into their product, into the service, into the pain point that they are solving, into the idea how to make lives of your customers better, how even make the world a better place. So I just love to talk about that. that. I think it's getting way more difficult when it comes to talking to investors. And one reason that I see there is also kind of an understanding of how the investor system works, how VCs approach the conversations with startups, and why there is actually so much pressure around it itself. So I think today is also very interesting to kind of learn a little bit more about, or not a little bit, but to learn about the communication skills that you can, train yourself or, prepare yourself very well. But on the other side, it's still so important to just understand how the market is functioning so you can really, really make the best out of each situation.
Yeah, yeah. One of the biggest struggles that I see when I'm working with founders on pitches is that they, like you're saying, they talk way too much about it because they're really excited about what they're doing. That's great. But what they're missing is this kind of urgency, like, okay, let's get to it. Like what, and they hang out way too long in saying what it is. They don't have that concise pitch, so to speak, for what they're up to, and most importantly, what the problem is that they're solving. I see a lot of people, they start with the solution. They're like, hey, we're creating this thing and it's amazing and it's wonderful. Da, da. And in the background, I'm thinking, yeah, but why? Like, why are you creating it? Give us a sense of what this problem is and why should we care? Have you seen that as well?
Yes, 100%. And one thing that I try to also kind of talk to my founders about is also to know who you're talking to, know your audience, because it's your pitch. Let's put it this example. I think this is a very classic situation where you're confident and persuasive, right? The pitch. But it so depends who you're talking to. It could be either the investor that you're talking to, so you have to pitch your business opportunity. But if you pitch to your customers, it's definitely more about the pain point. And really making it about your audience and not about yourself is so crucial to then also be convincing and be persuasive here as well. But then also getting even a step further, if you talk to investors, there's so many different investors out there and so many different types, right? So you also need to understand the personalities. If you're investors who's super interested into the facts, the numbers, then you should also adjust and present the facts and the numbers. While if an investor who starts the conversation with their life story, probably this is someone who really wants to hear about your story too. So use the time then also to share your story, to share your origin story, why you're doing it, share kind of the emotional process of your startup and of the problem that you're solving and your solution, right? So I think this is so helpful to already have like the first struggle of connecting with the person. It's already checked if you have a better understanding about the person you're talking to. And I do think that what I see is also when, as soon as you click with someone, you suddenly are more comfortable, and being comfortable with what you're talking about, with your pitch, with the situation, turns into being confident.
Yes,
so
totally.
I think it's just like a very complex but beautiful topic.
Yeah. And I mean, we can see this in any relationship, really. Like at first there's this, oh, who is this person? But when you can connect around something, everybody can kind of go, oh, okay, now we're talking, right? You have to get through that initial discomfort. So you're saying there are different types of investors and you have to understand how to connect with them. How would you recommend founders go about finding out what types of investors they're going to be pitching to? I wouldn't know where to start with that.
Yeah, some would say it's stalking. It's making research. So there's definitely so much information already out there, especially if you're an investor. You really try to have kind of a profile out there. It's probably also already on LinkedIn or on the website of the VC company. So there's just like a lot of information where you can already see the background of the person, or like some hobbies, some interests, LinkedIn posts they kind of posted about the content that you shared. So this is already a good way to kind of better understand who is the investor. But the other thing that is so underestimated by so many founders is just talking to other founders, kind of looking up on the VC firm, who are the founders that, the platform companies, the founders that got investment from the VC, and then just reaching out to them and asking them about their experience and if they have any recommendations, and also asking them about the insights here as well. And the great news here is founders are the most friendly and helpful people that you will ever meet. If you find someone you want to talk to, it's a very high chance that the person's super open to talk to you and share insights, and really unfiltered insights here as well.
Yeah, I found that to be true as well. And one of the recommendations I give, I love that you said just stalk them. I get a lot of questions about, for example, speaking on a panel. A lot of people get nervous about speaking on a panel. And so one of my recommendations is always just stalk whoever you're going to be on the panel with, even if you just have time to go look at their LinkedIn profile and see their face, just like, who is this person? And, read a little bit about them, maybe even reach out to them, have a conversation before you go on the panel. And then you feel like you have a bit of an ally there because you're not going in blind. I think that's what causes so much nervousness and stress for a lot of people in any situation where they need to communicate, is where they don't know who they're going to be talking to. So of course it's going to be nerve-wracking for you. So yeah, I think that's great advice. Yeah. So I love what you're saying about, so for investors, you're more pitching the opportunity. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Because when I'm teaching persuasive speaking, for example, it's often leading with the problem, right? And it's like, hey, we've got this problem, and here are the statistics on why it's a problem and why it's bad, and here's a solution that I think is really going to work. And then you support that. But when you're pitching an opportunity is obviously not a problem. So can you speak a little bit to maybe even the order that you would pitch it, or how you would structure that pitch so that you're pitching to the opportunity?
Yeah. So I think when it comes to pitching, there is not necessarily a right or wrong way. It really needs to fit the founders and fit your style. But a very typical way is to start with, a little intro, then the problem, and then the solution. And that's like a very common and very great approach, especially if you talk to investors who are not from the industry, who are not necessarily have the expertise. You really need to kind of, catch them from the start, so they fully understand, oh, what's that about? Oh, this is a problem. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, this is a solution. Okay, that could work. So I think it's again, depending on who you talk to, but I think it's a very common approach, and I really like also the approach. When it comes then after the problem and after the solution, when it comes then to kind of giving the opportunity, the business opportunity, investment opportunity, it's on the one side, it's definitely like the classic topic of giving them also, the market is big enough, my product is scalable, the business model is already kind of approved, like this business model is working, either I already tested it or it's like very common in my industry. So this is kind of the typical way where you would say, oh, this is a good business opportunity. On the other, like another note on business opportunity then is kind of then using also the pitch to show them it's now or never, giving them the urgency of, this is a great time to invest in me and to be part of the journey, right? So opportunity in that sense also kind of, like FOMO, the fear for investors. So kind of giving them also this unique opportunity that they could be part of the next big thing, even though I'm not a big fan of the word big thing, but still kind of, this is the opportunity now. And to get to this point, here, that has a lot to do with how you pitch, how exciting you are, how engaging you are. Like the storyline itself. Like I think one recommendation that I always have to founders is pitch your story. It should never be that you present your slides, but the slides support your story. So the main focus is the story and what you're talking about. And the slides in the background are just like a visual support and some highlighted words or highlighted numbers just to kind of, make it even more exciting. So here again, I think confident, persuasive speaking is exactly just like a beautiful example of pitching, because this is how you get to the opportunity.
Yeah, and I love what you have to say about the pitch deck being kind of in the background. It's not leading the conversation. I've worked with a lot of people who they have these pitch decks that are so kind of, I like to say, cumbersome, right? They're getting in the way of you communicating, and people relying on them like a crutch, and maybe they're pitching and they're kind of like looking at the deck if there's a screen behind them. And no, you're right. Really pitching your story and letting that lead the conversation, and then the slide deck is just, it's an afterthought. It's a tool. It's not what you are focusing on the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. I like it. It's a tool, because that's basically it. And you can do a second pitch deck with like way more explanations or words on it that you send out to investors after the pitch, for example. But during the pitch, during the conversation with investors, the focus should be on you as a founder.
Exactly. Yeah. And one of the things I like to point out, a lot of people don't know this, or maybe they know it and they're just conveniently forgetting it, is that the human brain, essentially, we can't read and listen at the same time. So I see a lot of decks that have a lot of text on them. And then meanwhile, the founder is speaking. So your eyes just naturally go to these words and you start reading because that's what you know how to do. And then you can't listen to what the founder is saying because you're too busy reading the slides. So I love this suggestion of, you have two decks. One hardly has any text on it. It's just visuals to help you tell a story. And then the other is one that you send out in an email or whatever before. Yeah.
And just like, by the way, but the text always wins.
Text always wins.
There's like text on there, your mind goes to the pitch deck. It's
yeah.
And especially when you pitch online. So
totally. Yeah. I think it's one of my little kind of like soapbox things in my life that I'm trying to get people to stop doing. It's stop putting all this text on your slides. Come on. Yeah, it's really important for me. So I'm glad that it's important for you too. So I've been asked a lot about the difference between men pitching and women pitching. And I'm curious what you've noticed. Is there a difference in the way men and women pitch? Should there be a difference in the way women approach pitching as opposed to men? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So maybe I'm going to start with, it's totally fine if people pitch differently. That makes us unique, that makes it individual, and then makes it also authentic. I'm just like not really a fan of generalizing it and making like men tend to feel more comfortable while pitching, or like being confident overall compared to women. I'm not a big fan of kind of those phrases. However, what I do see that the approach of fake it until you make it is kind of more common when it comes to male founders, or like pitches from male founders. I do see, or like from my experience with working with a lot of female founders, is that they have a really good understanding of what's kind of the status quo of the startup and what is possible within a certain time frame as well. So kind of the realistic approach, like very carefully with that word, but this is kind of my experience so far. And when it comes to kind of this fake until you make it, because it's so very common, it's such a common phrase and kind of, the approach. I'm not against it. Like, I do think sometimes it could just really, really help. And it helped a lot of female founders also before. But if you don't feel comfortable with it, then also don't do it. And I just want to highlight that as well. But when it comes to kind of the differences, I also wrote down a couple of points, because it's such a complex topic. It's not like easy to answer it, like, oh, this is the reason. We have to change this one reason. And it's unfortunately, it's also not about, you just need to be more confident and then you will get your investment.
Right.
It's not that
mean anyway. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, I think, so it already starts when talking about it's more complex than just like, oh, just be more confident. It already starts also with the questions that female founders get asked versus the questions male founders get asked. it's kind of also very common and like also a huge discussion already about it, that male founders mostly get asked about the vision, the big dreams, the, you know, like the goal at the end of the journey, while women or female founders get asked more about like the current situation, the worst cases, what happens if this and that changes, what happens if you don't reach this and that goal. So also kind of giving the questions, obviously it's, well, obviously, but it's easier to be confident if you share your vision. But the confidence level might be a bit influenced when suddenly you have to, you know, answer tough questions. Those questions are also about the backgrounds. While in men you see a lot of potential, female founders often get also asked about their past achievements, about their experience here as well. So again, I think just like also based on the questions, the answers, or making the answers seem more confident, just makes it a bit more hard as well here in those investment situations. And yeah, I think like the third point that I kind of wrote down here as well is in general, the imposter syndrome that influences the confidence level. There's like this super typical example of, you know, women only apply for jobs if they fulfill all the requirements. So I think when you reconsider a lot of the status quo and what you are, and for early stage companies, you always have to consider there's not much that you can already show and proves that you will be successful, right? It's a lot about building the trust and building relationships, and also the first investments are kind of on, you know, the potential and the promises, not necessarily on number, facts, or traction. So I think the imposter syndrome for female founders is just very, very strong, and looking or considering also like how many different roles women have to be, like a founder, a wife, a mother. Can I really have it all? What do I need to do to reach that all? Again, imposter syndrome. I think there's just like so many things in our society, in our private lives, but then also in the startup ecosystem that just like really strongly influence the confidence of female entrepreneurs here as well.
Yeah, for sure. And to that, because I get asked, okay, well, how do I anticipate and prepare for these situations, right? Because if you know that you're going to be asked questions about the immediate future, or like what happens if this doesn't work, or instead of these grand visionary questions, then okay, sure, it sucks that you're not being asked the grand visionary questions, but if you're prepared to answer the questions that you know you're going to get, then you can also do the job to control the conversation and add in the visionary stuff. Because I think a lot of times women, and maybe it's not just women, it's anybody, when you're being interviewed and you're being asked by investors, for example, all these questions, I think sometimes we get into the mindset of like, okay, I just need to answer the questions, like just like it's an interrogation or something. But we forget, many people forget, that we also have a bit of control here. So you answer the question about the immediate future, and then you slide in at the end. And what I see in the next 10 years is this. And you give it to them whether they asked you or not. So being prepared for those questions that, okay, maybe it's not so fair that you're getting asked that and the guys aren't, but that's the world we live in right now. And then being confident enough to insert your vision, to number one, have a vision, and number two, share it, because we're not always going to be asked for the vision. So that phrase of like, this is the way I see it, or here's what I see, that's a really powerful phrase to add in there. And then the past achievements question, right? Because what we're talking about essentially is, all right, I want this investor to feel that I am a credible place to, put their money, essentially. Like, do I trust this person to do what she says she's going to do? And the way to develop that trust and that credibility is to speak confidently about things that you have done in the past and be ready with that. That's something I work with in the workshops that we do. And I don't know if you were in one of those workshops, but one of the questions I have the women answer is, what's an accomplishment you're proud of? And then we kind of work on that answer. And if you can answer that question in a confident way, and you can say, hey, like, this is what I did, and we worked together as a team, and I was able to lead the team, and we got this result, and I'm really proud of that, and not hedge your language and not bury the main points and say it with this enthusiasm and passion, then the audience is going to be more likely to say, oh, wow, she did that. I feel like she could do this. And so essentially what I'm leading with here is like, yeah, you got to practice. You got to practice your answers to all these questions. I always recommend recording yourself, watching it, even though it's a little painful, getting feedback from other people, getting a communications coach even to help you organize the way you're sharing this information is really important. And what's great about that is that when you practice, the imposter syndrome kind of goes down a little bit, because you realize like, oh, like I did do that thing, and hey, I'm kind of great, and so yeah, it's a matter of getting comfortable with how amazing you are. I think, yeah, the voices inside are really loud, like, oh, you can't do this, or oh, who do you think you are? But it's up to you, it's up to us to tell that voice, like, actually, no, like, this is who I am, and I have accomplished a lot, and I can do this too. It's really, a lot of people ask me all the time, how do I get that voice to stop talking or shut up? And like, well, good luck. You can't, but you have to be stronger than that voice. That's the key. Yeah.
I love that you also mentioned preparation that much, because I think I totally agree. It's the key to everything, basically, right? Mm-hmm. And what I also like to tell my founders is to prepare an FAQ page, for example, to kind of also. Everything okay? Yeah, right? Oh, yeah, it's good. Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me? Yes, to prepare an FAQ page and really write down the questions that were asked quite frequently, but also the tough questions, and prepare the answer, because then you can also turn these difficult situations or even the unfair questions into a positive experience here as well. And answering those bad questions with confidence and successfully has even a higher effect than answering an easy question about the vision.
100%. Yeah, I love that you're saying that, because I am obviously a communications coach, but I struggle with communication sometimes. And I had a situation yesterday where I had to answer a text, and it was really, it just felt like the hardest thing I ever had to do. And so I actually created a document, and I started writing out all of, like, okay, this is what I want to say. No, delete it. This is what I want to say. Okay, what do I really want to communicate here? And it took me half an hour, but I got it down to 3 questions that I wanted to send to the other person. And I was really making sure that I wasn't using, we say, violent communication. So I wasn't accusing that person or being aggressive in my language, but I was leaving it open by asking questions and not assuming anything. And it took me a long time to do that. But I tell you, once I sent that text, I felt like, wow, I've really learned something. I learned something about my own communication style and patterns that I didn't even know I had. And I was able to change them in that moment because I spent so much time in preparation. I mean, one of my favorite quotes is oh God, and I'm going to forget the actual quote, but it's this famous actor. And he said, oh, I remember it now. He said, all the real work gets done in rehearsal. So you think that when you go out on stage, that's when you're acting, that's when you're doing the work. But no, it's in all the rehearsals before. That's when you're working out all these problems and figuring out what's the best way to say this and what should I focus on and what question can I lead with? And it takes time to get clear on all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, very powerful also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How often in your in the accelerator, how long is the accelerator? Is 3 months, right? And yes. How often do you guys meet?
So we have sessions twice a week, and most of the sessions are no-house sessions where we invite investors to kind of debunk the fundraising process and really give insight and structure to how to prepare, what to prepare for, and also kind of how to decide which way to go. Because talking to investors, and I think that's also very crucial, it's a two-way street, right? Even though you're the founder and even though you're pitching, you're still in the driver's seat of the conversation. So in case something happens in a conversation with investors, you just like highly disagree, or you just don't like the approach, the style, the question, it's also your decision to say yes or no to the investor. And in our know-how sessions, we exactly want to give both perspectives. We want to make sure the founders understand the investor side, but also want to allow founders to find their own way there. And a couple of the sessions are also peer-to-peer sessions where it's just like us founders and talking about current struggles or fundraising or like other topics as well. From the start, as there are only 10 participants, it also gets very personal. I think the founders are all very open and very honest, and yeah, just sharing also their struggles, and that already helps, right? Also speaking about it just helps.
Yeah. And how much do you work with the founders on their pitches, and any variety of pitches, like from the short ones to the long ones?
Yeah, so we do have a storytelling session in the beginning of the batch, because the story is kind of the key, and from the story on you can always then adjust to the different scenarios that you're using it. And then we have a feedback session with our co-founders, so female founders, Lisa and Nina, where it's all about, giving also feedback and supporting them. Then they have time to iterate their pitch and meet with investors in another session to also get their kind of the questions and the feedback on the pitch, and just like really, really have also the deadlines to practice, and then kind of, test it out, and then practice again and test it. And at the end, there's the demo day. So the end of the program is always a huge demo day. We invite all the investors of our network, of business angels, VCs, but also other founders or operators in the startup ecosystem to listen to the pitches, and to then afterwards also to connect and explore the investment opportunities.
Yeah, that's so cool. I want to do this. I want to be in the batch. That sounds so great. So one thing we haven't talked about yet, and I think it's important, is the whole like body language thing, and how we talked a lot about content and what do we say. And we can maybe talk a little bit more about like, well, how do we say it? How do we phrase it? But then there's also like, how do we actually deliver what we're saying? Because you can work on a pitch for weeks, months, and you feel like it's great. And then when you stand up to say it, you feel like an infant again. So yeah, let's talk about that for a second. What I'm curious what questions, I'm sure you get a lot of questions from these founders about, well, like, how do I look more confident, or you talked about fake it till you make it. How do I fake it till I make it? Like, what are you hearing from the founders? What are they asking you?
Yeah, so I think this question got even a bit more difficult because of the whole online and remote situation here as well. Yeah. I think the first thought about pitching online was kind of, that's so easy, I can do it from home, I feel more safe, which is probably like, this is for sure true and also like fair. But what a lot of founders forgot is that we still see you. We still can.
And we only see this much of
you're heading. Yeah. 100%. So what I've noticed also is like founders who think, they are kind of notes so they can look away, for example, or like in general, just kind of, like starting with the hand, some gestures here as well. And it's kind of, it applies, I guess, the same rules as in real life, right? Try to, sit up straight and bright, and to really get the energy in, sit tall, look up tall, and then also really try to look into the camera. I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with when it comes to the online meetings here as well, because you look to the people, you see yourself, you look to yourself here as well, right? Yeah. I'm also doing it. But I try to give also the founders kind of the challenge to, when they pitch or when they also, like practice the pitch, to always really look into the camera, because if you look to the camera, for everyone, it appears that you look directly to them.
Totally.
If you don't look into the camera, or rather just on the picture of the person, then the person might not see where you're currently looking at, because it's like different on their screen then as well. And then we had last year our in-person event after like 2 years of Corona and online pitching, right? And what we really, really did there is to give them enough time to practice on stage, because we knew they're early stage founders. Most of them were first-time founders, and in the last 2 years they never pitched in person somewhere.
Yeah.
So we really tried to give also them enough time to practice on stage, to get a feeling of the mic, of the of the clicker, of the screen behind them, of the size of the stage, of the size of the room, right? To have a feeling about, okay, look in the front, look in the back, to engage the room here as well with your eye contact. So it comes down, I think, to the very classic things that are very common, or a lot of people know, and then practice.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things, so you were saying, make sure you have a lot of energy. And when I help people project confidence when they're online, I always tell them to stand up. Whenever they're doing anything high stakes, it's really important to stand up, because you engage your body, you just feel more confident. Like you feel like you could do anything. And unfortunately, a lot of people, they don't take that advice to heart. And then once they do, then they're like, oh my God, it was totally different. I was so much more confident. And I said, I told you, like, come on. So yeah, standing up is really important. The eye contact thing with the cameras, it's kind of hard. It's weird. Like, I'm staring into this black hole right now. I'm not looking at you.
It's weird.
Totally weird, but you got to get used to it, because like you said, that is eye contact. And then, so there's this thing with this idea of confidence, right? There's this idea of, I can do it. And so much of what confidence is passion, right? It's just like, are you excited about this? Let me feel that from you. I get this question a lot, like, is it okay to show emotions when I'm pitching? And yeah, totally. Like, show people why you care. It's important. You're not a robot. You've got to be the conduit for that energy, because whatever you're feeling, whatever you're projecting, they're going to feel that. So if you feel excited, they're going to feel excited. So yeah, it's really important to be able to have that full range of expression when you're talking to founders. And yeah, exactly. In person, what you said about practice on the stage. I was always taught by my teachers that if you're ever going to do a workshop or a training or anything in person, or a talk, like a TED talk, you need to go physically to that space and get a feel for it by yourself, like without the audience there. So you feel comfortable. It is a thing. Yeah, for sure.
Also, like, totally agree to show emotions and to be passionate about, because this, there's like a little sparkle in you that needs to get out and needs to come to the audience. And then like, they're also passionate about it. And this also is so important to get their interest, to catch their attention here, and also to remember you after the pitches, because most of the time you're not alone when you're pitching, right? Especially on those events. They're like 6, 7, 8, 10 founders who are pitching in a row. So, you also need to be kind of memorable. They need to remember you. Yeah. So I think it's lovely if they show emotions and also kind of their story, how they founded or why they founded the company.
Yeah, totally. And the stories, like you said, are so important. How you founded the company, why you founded the company, and or also the story of the problem, right? It's a great fact. I love sharing this, that data is 22 times more likely to be remembered when it's shared within a story. So if you've got this great statistic about the problem that you're trying to solve, instead of just sharing the statistic, you tell a story of maybe someone who experienced that problem, and then you throw that statistic in there, and then people are going to remember. And the cool thing too is that people are much more likely to remember stories than anything. You know, you could share the market size, you could share the opportunity all day long, but people will remember stories that you tell. So that's always my big thing, is tell the story and keep it succinct and concise, and connect the dots at the end. Like, well, why did you tell that story? A lot of people forget that as well. They think they're just going to get it, but you actually have to spell it out. This is why I'm telling you this story. So yeah.
Yeah, never assume that they know what you're talking about.
Yeah. That's,
and
yeah. Go ahead.
The beautiful thing is, and there's so many stories out there, that fundraising is tough, building a startup is tough, pitching is hard, all those preparations that you need to do. But I think we also need to change again the story and the narrative of how amazing and incredible it is to be a founder, to have the opportunity to pitch, to talk to founders, to talk to investors, to get the investments, to grow and to accelerate. This is an incredible time. And when you do feel comfortable and confident about it, then you can fully enjoy this experience as well. And I think this is something that is not compared to any money or whatever price out there.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think it's like anything. If you focus on how hard it is, then it's going to feel hard. If you focus on, hey, this is a great opportunity, and look at all these tools that we have, and we can pitch to investors all over the world and talk to people all over the world so easily. I mean, you know, even 20 years ago, that was really hard to do. So we're very lucky that we live in this time, and these challenges that we're facing with, you know, how do we communicate better, and how do we succinctly communicate what we're doing and the problem we're solving. These are good challenges to have. This is what makes us grow, and this is what makes us better humans, to be honest. I mean, you know, if we're not being challenged like this, then what are we doing? We're just sitting around eating potato chips on the sofa, you know? So yeah, I love your positive attitude towards all this. I think that makes all the difference. Yeah. Awesome. Is there anything else you feel like we could talk about, or have we covered everything? I'm kind of looking at our notes here.
Yeah, me too.
We didn't talk about networking.
Yeah, true.
Mm-hmm. What were you?
Yeah, I think when it comes to networking and communication, I think this another situation where confident, persuasive speaking is so important, but a situation that definitely is underestimated by so many people, because there's so many hidden opportunities when networking. It could be that you're speaking to another founder. It could be that you're speaking to a program manager with a great network. It could be that you're speaking to an investor, a former investor who's now a founder, or a founder who's now a business angel. So there's so many interesting people out there, and you never really know, especially at events, right? Who you're gonna talk to and who you're gonna end up talking to. So I already said in the beginning that founders or people in the startup ecosystem are always super open to speaking to you, and very, very helpful people here as well. But there needs to be a common ground, and this common ground is kind of, you know, being confident and being passionate about what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I think if also during networking events or networking opportunities, you really think about that and go out there and feel, this is, you know, this is my goal for today, and I'm going to talk to those people. I'm going to tell them about my great idea, my great startup here. Mm-hmm. And then you start talking to them, you really can get a lot out of there, right? From insights and tips to intros, to general just support, or even a mentor. So I think it's just like something that always consider that, even though it sounds a bit exhausting, but all the time there are great opportunities that you can grab easily.
Yeah, totally. And I hear a lot that networking is hard for people because I don't like, it feels disingenuous. It feels inauthentic, right? And what I've noticed my own journey with networking is before I used to think, okay, I've got to talk to as many people as possible, right? And that caused me a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. And so I learned somewhere along the line to not focus on talking to everybody, but set a goal of like, I'm going to talk to 3 people and have meaningful conversations with them. And a meaningful conversation means you're not only sharing what you're excited about and what you're building, but you're also asking about the other person and you're curious about the other person. Because I've seen this a lot, especially I lived in the Bay Area for a long time in Silicon Valley, and you would go to these events and you feel bombarded and people are like, I'm building the startup and blah, 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 blah. And it just felt like an advertisement and it was exhausting. And I hated it. I don't know anybody who likes that. But somehow there's this idea that networking is about spewing your idea on the person in front of you. But it's a two-way. I mean, any good communication is a two-way thing. So sure, get your little elevator pitch down, 30 seconds, be able to communicate what you're doing in a cohesive and concise way. And then always end that pitch by saying, what about you? So it's not just you talking, but like, hey, well, what about you? Tell me about you. And then having this clear goal of 3 meaningful conversations with people so it doesn't feel overwhelming. I find that that's always really helpful for networking events.
Yeah. I love that idea. I love that approach as well. And yeah, it's horrible when people start selling themselves without you asking them about it.
Yeah. It feels objectifying, like, oh, you're just here, you're kind of using me as a platform to sell your thing. So yeah.
I
Cool.
do have kind of also maybe a final questions, a topic that we didn't really touch upon yet. But it's kind of about clear communication to stand out, because I do think that's everything where we go. It might be if we go to investors, if we meet different startups, or even on a networking event, everything is kind of overwhelming. There are always a lot of people talking, right? So what can you do to stand out?
To be more clear in a networking situation and stand out in a networking situation? Yes. Yeah, well, I think it really comes down to a couple of things. Number one, being authentic. And number two, sharing something that this may sound weird, but I'll back it up. Sharing something that's emotional. So let me start by being authentic. So I love what you said about how everybody pitches differently. And there isn't this like one way to pitch and you need to do it that way. And it's the same with networking, I think. I think everybody should approach networking in their own way, and they shouldn't feel uncomfortable about being who they are. So I'll give you an example of this. Even though I'm a very outgoing, generally quite confident person, when I go to networking events and I see all these people and I have this idea in my mind of like, I need to talk to 3 people, it's pressure, you feel pressure. So what happens for me is I get blocked and I'm like, oh, but how do I even start the conversation? So I get hung up on this and then somehow I can't start the conversation. So what I've started to do, and it's very much who I am as a person. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear all that banging.
No, not at all.
Doing like construction underneath my house. So anyway, so what I've started to do, and I've also started to do this at parties as well, and it really helps with the anxiety, is I walk up to someone and I look them in the eye and I say, hi, I would like to talk to you. Like it's just so honest and so obvious. And it's kind of endearing as well, because you're being vulnerable. Like, hey, this is hard for me. I would love to talk to you. Is that okay? Or, would you like to have a conversation with me? Just breaking the ice like that, I think is kind of funny. So that's my style of doing it. And maybe that's not for everyone, but again, we each do networking in a different way. And then the second point that I was making to have be remembered really is to share some emotion. And the reason why I say emotion is because people remember the way they feel, right? So for example, I teach a lot and I'm always trying to get my students to laugh because I know that if they laugh, they're going to remember that thing. Because it's just like, that's the way the human mind works. Like, oh, I had this strong emotion. I'm going to remember that. And it could be laughter, it could be sadness, it could be pain, whatever. You're going to remember that. So you want them to feel something. So then the question is, okay, how do we get them to feel something? Well, the easiest way to get somebody to feel something is to tell a story, because stories create emotions. So if you can tell a story about, for example, the problem that you're solving, like tell me a story, a real life story of how this is affecting people. Not only am I going to listen, but I'm going to remember because I'm going to feel something. So that's really my advice for how to stand out when networking, how to engage people right away, and how to be remembered.
Yeah, I love it. I really, really do love both ideas kind of, and especially telling the stories and connecting the situation to an emotion. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah. Stories are, I'm such a nerd about storytelling. I love it so much. I can't get enough and I love teaching it. So it's great. All right, so Antonella, we are out of time, but thank you so much. This is a wonderful conversation. I learned a lot. And I'm excited to put this into written content and share this video with other people. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca, for inviting me. It was really a pleasure talking to you, as always.
Okay, all right. We will see you online again soon then.
For sure.
Sounds good. Bye.
Bye.